Hello, good evening. Welcome to the webinar. This is Tim Duffy, K3LR, and on behalf of the Worldwide Radio Operators Foundation, I'd like to welcome you to this webinar. We're very pleased this evening to have an excellent speaker on board. He is Jim Wilson, K5ND, and the title of his webinar is What is Radio Scouting and What Does It Mean to Me? And Jim is the chairman of the Boy Scouts of America's Radio Scouting Committee. He is president of the K2BSA Amateur Radio Association, and he is a member of the World Scouting JOTA-JOTI team. Please welcome Jim Wilson, K5ND. Jim?
All right. Thank you very much, Tim, for the introduction, and thanks to Ken Clearbout, K4ZW, for opening up this channel to me to talk about radio scouting, and thanks to the Worldwide Radio Operators Foundation for their support. So the title is What is Radio Scouting? And as Tim mentioned, my involvement began this century actually in the Jamboree on the Air team at the USA level, and just in 2014 was appointed to the World Scouts Jamboree on the Air and Jamboree on the Internet team. So we've had a great deal of fun, but enough about me. Let's talk a little bit about who's in the audience, and I see we have 73 in the audience. That's an interesting number, but we're going to do a little bit of a poll here. How many of you were involved in scouting? And we're going to pop up a poll for you to respond to, and we can get a count. Yeah, so you're seeing that that poll there now. Click yes or no, press submit, and then I think we'll give it about a minute, and then we'll see what those numbers are. Okay. Go ahead and show us what those numbers are if you can. Aha, 80%. So let me quick jot that down. I think it was going to be a similar kind of response, but I wanted to point out, I was looking through the July-August issue of the National Contest Journal at some of the biography, or at actually all of the biographies of the competitors. And these are the four that stood out of those who got their start in amateur radio through scouting. LX2A got involved with Jamboree on the Air. OE5, OHO came into contact through Boy Scouting. LU1, FAM, first time he saw a radio. And N2NL got involved through scouting. So it makes things happen. And if you paid any attention to those biographies, most of those guys seem to have started at the age of 6 or 7. I think that's when their memory was there. They were probably tapping on a key in their crib. But the story today is, what is radio scouting? And so I'm going to touch on the Jamboree on the Air that many of you have probably participated in, Radio Merit Badge, and some new things that have been happening in scouting that you might be familiar with. The Amateur Radio Operator Radio Strip, and the Morse Code Interpreter Strip, and then we'll touch quickly on the Jamboree operation. But here is what I call the radio path. It begins with an introduction. It goes into rank advancement and then into special recognition. And we'll revisit this path through the course of this presentation. So what is Jamboree on the Air? It's a worldwide event. This is the 57th running of Jamboree on the Air, starting in 1958. Happens the third weekend in October. You can set your calendar on that. But the thing, as I got involved in this just a few years ago, I was really surprised to learn that it's actually the largest scouting event in the world. Now, we measure this at the World Scouting level with reports that are filed and a little bit of extrapolation as well. But we estimate there's about 700,000 scouts involved during that third weekend. And then, if we add Jamboree on the internet, which is another 300,000, we're up to 1 million scouts getting engaged in technology that third weekend. It also involves 22,000 radio amateurs, about 12,000 stations are on the air, and that's across 150 countries. That's about the size of the scouting universe, 150 countries. Now, so what are the benefits? And I've got a quote here from, this is the USA Jamboree on the Air 2012 report from the K2TD event in New Jersey. And this fellow wrote in and said, these young individuals had in about 30 hours combined lessons that will last a lifetime. They learned about geography, physics, math, languages, world citizenship, science, friendship, teamwork, and so many other skills that most kids their age are never able to experience. These kids' minds have been stamped forever with the experience of communicating with others around the world, or around the corner and across the world. And that was from a commissioner, a BSA commissioner in New Jersey that observed that event. From another one we heard, this is WR9ARC. The scouts cheered when the Canadian scouts in Alberta reported having snow falling. They also practiced rudimentary Spanish with a Mexican scouter and tried and failed to have a German ham understand that the 9 in our call sign was not 9 or no. But that boggles my mind a little bit. But it gives you an idea of the kinds of things that happen during Jamboree on the Air. It's about conversations. Ideally, it's scouts to scouts. And they're learning about other cultures, and they're being exposed to technology fun, and I call it the magic of amateur radio. This is their first exposure. So, and a couple of photos here. The one on the right is a scout in California, and the one on the the one on the left, I failed marching in the U.S. Air Force. If you in my left and right, but the one on the left from California, the one on the right is actually KH-6BB, the USS Missouri in Pearl Harbor. They got on the air last year and had just a blast, as you can tell here. So what kind of results have we been getting at in the USA around Jamboree on the Air? Well, 2010 is when I got involved in this. Our previous trustee for K2BSA and Jamboree on the Air organizer was Ray Moyer, WD8, JKV, a longtime supporter. He retired, and they looked around the National Office of the Boy Scouts and said, who else is a ham radio operator? And they found me. And I said, sure, let me at this. Let me see what I can do with this. But what we found was we really weren't measuring, or at least not measuring very much. And as you guys know that are involved in technology, once you start measuring, things start happening. You're putting a magnifying glass on it, and we started getting some promotion involved. So we had, you can see triple-digit growth in 2011, 2012 in the number of stations that got on the air and the number of scouts that were reported on the air. 2013, we got into the double digits of growth for stations, but the scout participation was a little bit disappointing, but we also don't think everybody reported. We had about 400 stations register their operation before the event, but only received 271 reports. reports. So we're thinking that might be part of the culprit there, and we'll see how it goes for 2014. So just a quick snapshot of how you organize a JOTA event. I really don't expect you to rush out right now and try to organize an event for October. That's going to be pretty difficult. We typically advise starting in February or March to work with the local Scout Council to try to line up some things around that third weekend in October. And to help with that effort, you see here, we call it Jamboree on the Air Talking Points, and we've got a link there at the K2BSA site. Ham radio operators, as you well know, speak a different language. Well, so do Scouters, and particularly Scouters at a Scout Council. Some of them, unfortunately, you'll approach and say, gee, I'd like to help out with your Jamboree on the Air. And they're going to reply, Jamboree what? And because they don't even know about it. Now, it might actually be going on in their council, they're just not aware. So these talking points are going to help, are meant to help in that translation process about describing what's important to a Scout Council. The best way to organize a Jamboree on the Air event is to line it up with some other scouting event that is happening that weekend. That's why we suggest getting involved with the council very early in the year as they're mapping out the calendar. So ideally, they've got a big camporee going on that weekend that you can show up, set up your station, and be one more activity for the scouts to get engaged with. It works so much better that way. I've talked to a lot of disappointed amateur radio operators where the Scout Council actually asked them, could you set up an event? They've gone to a park, they've set up everything, and very few people show up. It's so difficult these days to carve out a weekend to go just for Jamboree on the Air. It's so much better to go where the Scouts are and set up. And it's also, you know, you need to think about Jamboree on the Air as an introduction. Some of them, their hair is going to catch on fire and they're really going to be excited about it. Others going to go, oh, well, whatever, and they're going to go on to the next one, which you've planted some seeds. So there's a lot of resources available to help in setting up a Jamboree on the Air. The scouting.org/JOTA link is just jam-packed with guidelines for leaders, for operators, planning calendars, success stories, books, certificates, you name it, they've got it. And then the K2BSA, which K2BSA is the Amateur Radio Association associated with the National Council of the Boy Scouts of America. There's a ton of information on there as well. So I'll mention just briefly World Jamboree on the Air, Jamboree on the Internet. Jamboree on the Air is organized by the World Organization of the Scout Movement. And they're the scouting body that authorizes the other scouting the national scouting associations. So this is a world event. There's a new world team that was organized for 2014. I was fortunate enough to be appointed there. I'll just note that their headquarters just moved to Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. They're getting things set up to get their station on the air. I understand the station that's located near Geneva in Switzerland, HB9S, will actually be on the air this year. We thought its last year was in 2013 because of this move, but it is now going to be on the air. But JOTA-JOTI.info is where you go for the World Scouting information. So what can you do as a ham radio operator during Jamboree on the air? I'd suggest getting on the air and demonstrating the hospitality of amateur radio. Hand out some QSOs, engage in conversations. What I tell people that are getting involved at Jamboree on the Air for the first time is that It's about conversations. It's not about context. So it's not a contest. There's no reward for contacting the most stations. It's about scouts to scout conversations or scout to ham radio operator conversations. And as I tune across the air during Jamboree on the air, I'm just amazed at how many ham radio operators, I imagine they actually stumble across it. They get on the air with a scouting station, and they're there an hour or two later, still handing out conversations to the scouts that take turns in front of that microphone. It can be really fascinating to listen in. And as we pointed out with the poll that we captured with so much labor early on, 80% of you were engaged in scouting. What a great way to reach back and touch base with these scouts. And it is about inviting scouts to get on the air. And I love this photograph here. It was taken during the 2013 National Scout Jamboree. That's Ray Novak and 9JA. And I ask you, looking at this photograph, who's having more fun in this picture? I think it's Ray. He had an absolute blast helping these scouts get on the air, seeing them light up in these, learning what it is to be in amateur radio. So let's come back to that radio scouting path again. Let me double check time, 8:20 or 24 minutes after the hour. So I think I'm doing good time here. But back to that radio scouting path. Again, Jamboree on the air, I like to look at it as the top of the funnel. It's very wide open. Give scouts an introduction to this magic that's amateur radio and to other cultures and other scouts around the world. So it's an introduction, you're planting seeds. But then it gets into rank advancement, something that's big for scouts, and it's the Radio Merit Badge. So what is the Radio Merit Badge? You see the patch there on your screen? It's an introduction to radio. There's actually 3 different paths that you can take to earn the Radio Merit Badge. There's a broadcast path, a set of requirements around broadcasting, a set of requirements around shortwave listening, and a set of requirements about ham radio. Well, I'll tell you, we don't have stats on which options the scouts choose, but I can tell you that broadcasting and shortwave listening require weeks and months of investment listening to the radio, recording what you're hearing, and things like that. The ham radio option takes about a day in a workshop. And at the Jamboree, we used a 4-hour time frame to teach it. So you can imagine what the scouts actually select there. And that, you can see a little bit of that in this graph here. I asked the statistical department at the Boy Scouts National HQ to give me some stats on the number of Radio Merit Badges earned. The numbers go back to the early 50s, and here I've grouped that into decades to get a little bit easier view of it. But you can see it kind of tapered off through the 60s, the 70s, into the 80s, and in the early 90s, there was a change that happened in the requirements in that the Morse code requirement was dropped, just as it was dropped many other places, and it started to take off. And you can see that's happened in this past decade. And in fact, last year, 2013, just over 7,000 scouts earned the Radio Merit Badge. And that's where, and that was a new record by, I think, maybe 10 or 20. It's been in that 6,000 to 7,000 range for a number of years now, each year. And I'll tell you, there's one reason for this. Scouts, in the mind of a scout, and Tim told me his son just earned his Eagle Scout, so he knows this really well. There's only 2 different kinds of merit badges in their minds. The first kind is the ones that are required to earn Eagle. The other kind are easy merit badges. Well, the radio merit badge fits in that easy category. A one-day workshop, or at the Jamboree, we were able to do it in a 4-hour time frame. So that's one of the reasons for the popularity, but what an opportunity to get them involved in amateur radio. So let's come back to that radio scouting path again and look at that bottom rung in the ladder, if you will, or step. It's called special recognition, and these are patches. And that's another magic thing in the world of scouting. Can I get a patch, and can I sew it on my uniform? Well, both of these, that is true. The first one that I'm going to talk about is, I'm going to get a quick drink of water here. Okay, first one I'm going to talk about is the amateur radio operator rating strip. This, actually back in the 1940s, there were some rating strips that scouts could earn and sew on their uniform, and the Radio Man rating strip was one of those. And as the BSA's Radio Scouting Committee started talking with the BSA's Awards and Insignia Committee, this idea came up. And by golly, if we didn't get it approved, we were quite delighted with that. But all licensed youth and adult members can wear this. It goes on the, let me double check my uniform here, it goes on the right sleeve. And if you have a ham radio license, you qualify. Buy it, put it on your sleeve. It's a natural follow-on to the radio merit badge. That's the one reason I like it so much. It's a 3-step process, if you will. Learn about ham radio and on Jamboree. Excuse me. Learn about ham radio in Jamboree on the air. Get involved with the radio merit badge for a one-day workshop, and for about the same investment in time, study up for that technician license, take the test, and earn the license, and you've got another patch that you can sew on your uniform. And in that first year, it's been about 1.5 years now that that's been available. 6,800 of them were sold in the first year. Now, I imagine a few of them, actually a handful of them went to me to sew on all my uniforms, but it's pretty popular, as you can see. But it's a great step in the process of engaging scouts in amateur radio. The other one is the Morse code interpreter strip. Now, the interpreter strip has had a long existence in scouting. It goes over the right pocket on the uniform, and typically it says something like Espanol or any of the other languages, German, Sprechen Sie Deutsch, that sort of thing. And it's meant for if you're at a gathering and there's a scout there that can't speak English, he sees that interpreter strip and he comes up to you and says, "Help me out here, what's going on?" And that's what it's for, and there's some qualifications around that. Well, when the Radio Scouting Committee first reached out to the Awards and Insignia Committee, we were looking at that particular location to say amateur radio. We kind of figured amateur radio itself is a completely different language, if you will. And the committee, after reviewing that, came back to us and said, well, we looked at this, amateur radio really isn't a language. And then we said, well, wait a minute, maybe they're talking about Morse code. And then they said, we went back and looked at your proposal, and no, you weren't talking about Morse code. So they responded, no, we can't approve this. Well, after we read that, about 30 minutes later, we submitted another proposal for the Morse code interpreter strip. And lo and behold, about a day later, they approved it. And later, I talked to one of the committee members, and he said, yeah, I guess you can say we telegraphed our intentions to you. So this is a lively little thing. The requirements are basically 5 words per minute, sending and receiving, and those requirements are online. It's something that's qualified at the unit level. So they have to appoint somebody to test the skills of the scout. But it's already the second largest selling interpreter strip at 1,200 in the past year. The highest selling interpreter strip is Espanol, and I believe that's at about 1,300 to 1,500 a year. So we're very, very close with Morse code, and you can see the patches shown there on the screen. And just like the other interpreter strips that are expressed in their own language, this one spells out Morse in its and das. So Morse code is alive and well, as you've all seen in the CW contest, but it's alive and well in scouting as well. And then I want to touch base just briefly on the National Scout Jamboree. The K2BSA operation happened in July of 2013, and let me touch base a little bit on what K2BSA is. That call sign was associated with the National Council of the Boy Scouts of America in 1971 after a lot of hard work by a guy named Walt Maxwell, W2DU, that many of you have heard of his great work. But he worked with the FCC back in the day before vanity call signs to get that call sign awarded to the association that was the Amateur Radio Association that ran the club station at the National Council, which at that time was located in New Jersey. Their first Jamboree operation was in 1977, and they've been at every Jamboree since. So this particular vintage, July 2013, we put up a demonstration station at the new location for the Jamboree, which is at the Summit Bechtel Scouting Reserve in West Virginia. It's a fabulous facility. This was its first Jamboree, really its opening hurrah for the whole high adventure base. But we had a demonstration station, 2,600 scouts came through that in the 10 days of the Jamboree. Radio Merit Badge, 339 scouts earned their Radio Merit Badge during the Jamboree. And I want to touch base with you a little bit on that one. The fellow that was in charge of Radio Merit Badge, Ron Wood, K0BRO, figured out a way to start the classes every hour on the hour. It's almost like a movie theater. Show up and you have a short wait for the next class starting. And started every hour on the hour, 90 minutes in seat, learning the theory and learning operation, 30 minutes in a demonstration station in front of a radio, followed by another 90 minutes in seat and answering some questions, and they walked away in less than 4 hours with a Radio Merit Badge. And I'll tell you, it was one of the few merit badges that a scout could actually earn at the 2013 National Jamboree. So we also had amateur radio direction finding fox hunting course. About 100 scouts went through that, had a lively little competition there. We also had a scheduled contact with the International Space Station. 10 scouts were selected for that honor to talk to Luca Parmentano from Italy, who was the astronaut who got to speak to us. And we had a big crowd as well that was gathered around. We also had a few high-altitude balloon launches, and then we set up on a permanent basis 3 repeater installations. And I'll get into that right now. Actually, our Jamboree sponsors I wanted to mention as well. ICOM America supplied us with all the transceivers that were in use, installed those 3 repeaters, a 2-meter FM repeater, 70 centimeter FM, and a 70 centimeter D-Star repeater on a permanent basis. They're still in operation there for all the scouting activities at the summit in West Virginia. And then STEP IR provided us with verticals and beam antennas, array solutions with bandpass filters, gigaparts with headphones, and the ARRL pitched in with books, posters, banners, flags, all kinds of support for us. Now, the rest of that question that we began with was, so what does radio scouting mean to me? This is exactly what it means. It's called mentoring the next generation of hams. And this graphic on your screen was produced by ICOM America, and you may have seen it in some of your local amateur radio stores. They produce banners and posters and handouts and such to promote this concept of mentoring the next generation of hams. And it's, you know, and I want to point out as well, it's not only that radio scouting path that we showed of Jamboree on the air, and then Radio Merit Badge, and then the specialty awards around the amateur radio operating strip and Morse code interpreter strip. It's also those scouts that show up, see Jamboree on the air, gain a little bit of understanding about amateur radio, and say, well, I don't really think that's for me, but it looks like a fun activity. Well, those are the guys that are going to be running in the future your housing association, and going to be considering your petition to put up an antenna tower in your backyard. They're the ones that are going to say, amateur radio. Oh yeah, I remember that. I got on the air, a Jamboree on the air, and there's this great ham radio operator that spent a long time talking to us, welcoming us to the hobby, introducing us. So even if they don't go on and earn a Radio Merit Badge or a license, they're being exposed to amateur radio, and it could well come into play at some time in the future. So just a quick shout out to ICOM and the other things that they're doing outside of Jamboree on the air, outside of the Jamboree. They've provided us 10 complete stations for loans to councils. They're in Pelican cases. They're 7200s with antennas, power supplies, microphones, and etc. We're entering the 3rd year of that program, and a Scout Council can reach out and say, here's the local club, here's the control operator, here's what we're going to do with it, we'd like to borrow the station. And so many have reached out to do that, and it's basically planting another seed that's helping them get engaged in amateur radio. So it's working really well. ICOM is also promoting radio scouting year-round. Mentioned the repeaters, and just a note to Ray Novak and 9JA, a really champion of radio scouting, and also want to point out ARRL support. I'll point out that scouting was founded in America, was founded in 1910. The ARRL, celebrating the 100th anniversary this year, 1914. In 1918, the Radio Merit Badge came into being. It was actually called the Wireless Merit Badge at that point, and ARRL worked with the Boy Scouts of America to set those requirements up to craft that Radio Merit Badge pamphlet to guide the Scouts. So ARRL has been there from the beginning. And in this century, Brian Milishowski and 5CGT led a committee on scouting for the ARRL that resulted in a memorandum of understanding between Boy Scouts and ARRL, recognizing all those years of cooperation and committing to still further years of cooperation. Hey, Craigie, Dave Sumner have been very, very supportive. Dave actually served on the K2PSA Jamboree staff in years past. Larry Wolfgang is our guy there at the ARRL. He's still engaged in scouting as a scout leader. He's on the air. Actually spoke with him from the Jamboree on ham radio as he had his scouts in Connecticut connecting with us. Deborah Johnson's done so much to maintain the ARRL website and all the material they put there for radio scouting. Bob Idner-Bitson provides us booth space at Dayton. So next time you're at Dayton, stop by the radio scouting booth that is within the ARRL exhibit. And then a final shout out to the QST staff that have published a number of radio scouting articles over the years, including a couple that I've written. So big shout out to ARRL. And so it's, gosh, I finished, I think, right on time, even with a little bit of labor around the pole. But it's time for questions, and you've got the questions. Hopefully, I've got the answers. So, Tim, how's the questions look?
They look pretty good, Jim. We've got several that have come in, and so we will start with those. And if you do have a question for Jim Wilson, K5ND, please enter them, type them in, and I will read them as long as we have time here this evening. And so the first question comes in from Eric Wooster, and he says, my club is planning a JOTA support event this year. Are the presentation slides available to share with them?
You betcha. I'll have these posted on the K2BSA website, k2bsa.net. In fact, let me swing to the next slide there. There's the URL for k2bsa.net. I'll have these posted tomorrow. Let me write that down. We'll have the slides posted tomorrow, and I know this webinar is being recorded and will also be posted, but I don't think tomorrow. It'll be a little bit later. And so look for it there. I'll put it in the news section, and it'll be on a separate page. We'll also get the word out on the K2BSA Facebook page and via the Twitter account.
Okay. Steve Largent says, will we ever try to contact the International Space Station again? I was one of the scouts that did the contact 2 years ago, and it really boosted attendance compared to last year.
Actually, yeah, I've got a bunch of different answers for that one. Let me start through them. And Steve, I think I recall, I believe you were at the Jamboree, 2013 Jamboree, and a lot of support around that. The K2BSA operation at the Jamboree has scheduled an ISS contact, I think, for the last 3, if not 4, Jamborees. So it's been a pretty regular deal. And ARISS, Amateur Radio and the International Space Station, has been very supportive of that. I'll also mention schools and other scouting associations can get on the schedule for the ISS. I've been involved in 2009 and again in 2011 with the National Scouting Museum. During Jamboree on the Air, they had a scheduled contact with the International Space Station. Unfortunately, 2009 was a bust. The frequencies weren't working, but 2011, we actually have a video up on the K2, I'm pretty sure on the K2BSA site of that contact. There was also, sometimes the International Space Station will get on and just hand out contacts. They won't be scheduled. And Doug Wheelock, I've forgotten his call sign, and I believe it was the 2010 Jamboree on the Air. He got on and handed out QSOs during that entire weekend, and there was a great effort from Oklahoma where they made a Yagi out of barbed wire and driftwood and made a contact with the International Space Station. It was pretty incredible. So much agreed that contact with the International Space Station can be very exciting and generate a great deal of interest.
Great. Comment from Bruce Bileby. He said, when I taught the radio merit badge at summer camp this past summer, I did tell the scouts about the special strips, and they were excited. And from Dudley Allen, he said, I decided to earn my radio tickets after helping my son earn his Radio Merit Badge. Since then, I've developed expertise and coordinated several JOTA events over the past few years. I seem to be the only scouter pushing for JOTA events within my council. Are there communications to the council leaders encouraging them to reach out and participate in JOTA, JOTI? This is from Dudley Allen, KD0NMD.
Well, Dudley, that's, let's see, you've struck a nerve, I think. Yes, there is communication that goes out, and in fact, I think 2 weeks ago, you might have seen Brian's blog for Scouting Magazine did a very nice promotion around Jamboree on the Air and Jamboree on the Internet. Emails went out to everybody that was that's registered, and so they're getting the word out. But it is, as you've experienced in your own council, it's a laborious process. The way that it works within Scout councils, and I look at my time here, I think I'm doing all right, is this is an event supported by the international department within the national office. And the international department has what's called international representatives at every Scout council. And it's their responsibility to promote Jamboree on the Air as a worldwide event. But I'll tell you what I've discovered, an amusing story. One of the guys I worked with on Jamboree came, and he's on our scouting committee as well, came back and said, hey, I've talked to 2 different international representatives at 2 different local councils, told them about Jamboree on the Air. They're really excited about it, and they want to know how they could do more. And I had to chuckle, because it's actually in their job descriptions as volunteers to promote Jamboree on the Air. But as you can tell from that story, they don't even know what it is. So it's there is communication going out, but there's a lot of communication hitting people, and it's a never-ending task. And having worked as a communication executive, I guess that's a good thing. It kept me employed. There's never enough communication. So Dudley, I agree. We need to do more and have maybe more impact. Appreciate your work on Jamboree on the Air.
Jim, you mentioned ARL support. Do they have banners or flyers for our JOTA? As an ARL member, will that help? This is from Brian Kimes.
Primarily what they actually, ARRL has some really good flyers about that's focused at the youth market, or focused at toward youth, I guess, and getting them engaged. They're very well designed to capture attention, and I believe they mentioned Jamboree on the Air, and of course they mentioned Jamboree or the ARRL Kids Day. I know a number of operations around that as well. What ARRL also does is they have a significant amount of content on their website supporting Radio Merit Badge, supporting Jamboree on the Air, and the general topic of radio scouting.
Okay, great. And David Goldenberg had asked, was this webinar recorded and will it be shared? The answer is yes. This webinar is being recorded, and it will be available in a few days, maybe as much as a week, but hopefully just a few days on the WWROF.org website. That's the Worldwide Radio Operators Foundation.org website, and just look under the webinar archive and you'll see this webinar plus other webinars there. Another question for you, Jim. Foreign scouts can apply for the shown badges, and that comes from Andre, Papa Yankee 3 India Tango.
Well, Actually, before I answer that question, I want to make one more comment about the brochure that was mentioned, that ARRL. There actually is a brochure available on the K2BSA website. It's in PDF form. It's a threefold brochure that promotes everything about radio scouting. So it's something that you can download, you can take to your local quick copy, print out some, have them folded and handed out, and they're focused on primarily on an amateur radio audience, but they'd be very helpful for scouting audience as well. And now, as far as foreign scouts, I'll mention, yeah, and actually this thought passed my mind earlier today and left it off, but the Netherlands Scouting Association and the Australian Scouting Association actually have an amateur radio patch. If you have a license, you can sew that patch on. And that's Netherlands and Australia. But the other national associations, they run their own scouting association, basically. So it's what they authorize. Some, I know I'm talking with one you know is TG9 AJR in Guatemala. His scout association doesn't have a radio merit badge, as an example. So the real answer is you can certainly collect these patches, and collecting patches is a big thing in scouting around the world. But sewing them on your uniform would be up to your national scouting organization, and it's doubtful that they would allow that, but you can certainly check.
Okay. Thank you, Jim. Bruce Koski writes in, he said the audio, he was having trouble with the presentation tonight. Will the website recording on WWROF have the audio? And the answer is yes. And a question for you, Jim. Does ICOM or anyone else have any assistance for Scout councils to set up permanent shacks at their own Boy Scout camps? This comes from Jack Stevens.
Well, the assistance on something like that for your local council ideally comes from a local amateur radio club, somebody that's local, and so if that's the hands-on assistance, and in fact, I'll just note that loan station. It is on loan. It does come back, or it is routed to the next council after that loan has expired. But it requires not only for the scout executive, the local council, to sign off and approve it, but a local club to sign off and approve it, as well as the control operator, who is typically deeply engaged with scouting. So if you're talking about financial assistance rather than hands-on assistance, Ray cited to me that one of ICOM's motto is for the love of scouting, but they don't offer discounts. In fact, they don't sell direct, except in rare occasions. It's your local dealer that sells the equipment.
Okay, and this is from Juan, TG9AJR, and he said, I would like to congratulate Jim, K5ND, and the Worldwide Radio Operators Foundation for this great webinar and the great support and presentation, and thank you very much. Also a thank you from Bruce, AH0U, and a thank you from England, from Frank, M0AEU, and he will see us on JOTA. And then from NE4RD, this is Bill Stearns. It's our first time doing JOTA in our district. We've registered a special event call sign, which is Kilo 7 Juliet, and organized it around our fall Jamboree. We'll have 40 meters through 10 meters, HF, SSB, RIDI, PSK 31, and Echolink. Any other suggestions for fun modes or bands from you, Jim?
Okay, well, it sounds to me like you've got it well covered. I know that one of the the challenges during a Jamboree on the air event, or even a radio merit badge workshop, is getting somebody else on the other side of the conversation. Just calling CQ is going to be challenging, but there'll be a lot of stations on the air, and I heard you Echolink mentioned, so you've got a natural to reach out. There will be people on Echolink. We've also had a few stations set up through a local repeater, or even simplex on 2 meters or 70 centimeters, with a guy around the corner with a handy talkie, just to get the conversation started and going, to make sure there's somebody there to support it. But it sounds like you've got a great event organized, and you're doing it exactly like I described earlier. Go where the scouts are, where they'll be there having fun in a lot of different activities, and here's one more that they can get engaged in and be introduced to the magic of amateur radio.
Jim, Doug asks, what is the optimum number of scouts around a JOTA station to maintain interest and attention? Is it 5, 10, 15? What is it?
Wow, I don't think I know. I guess making an answer up, because I don't really know. Having a certain number there is certainly going to attract other scouts, and I think that's going to be helpful. Something that I can call on is how we set up the stations around the Jamboree, the National Scout Jamboree. I've forgotten now how many we had stations, but it was a bunch. But we typically had one control operator and 4 chairs, so they could sit down and fairly rapidly spend some time in front of the microphone. So you don't want them to stand around too long. You want to get them in front of the microphone, get them engaged, getting over mic fright, that it's called, and coming up with a conversation. I will tell you too, leaks into my brain just now, a number of people will actually set up a sheet of paper by the microphone and give them hints on what to talk about on the air that helps them overcome that mic fright. So as far as number of scouts, I want to say the more the merrier, but getting 4 in front of there and getting them in front of the microphone in fairly rapid order is a good way, and then moving on to the next group.
Jim, Robert writes in, he says, our council camporee will be on October 10th, 11th, and 12th. We'll be active as Whiskey 2 Tango Radio Charlie on October 11th. How do I get better cooperation from our council leaders?
It's, now, was that a district camporee?
It's a council camporee, so I'm assuming,
Yeah, it's at the big level, at the council level.
Right.
Well, it's take a look at that talking points document. 2, take a look at that planning calendar that's at scouting.org/JOTA. The real trick is to get engaged with somebody at the council during their planning meetings, which typically happen, I'm told it happens in May for the fall camporees. But, getting engaged in March or April would be a good way to get started. But so that you can reach out to them and better understand why they're scheduling it a week off from Jamboree on the Air, and tell them about this great event. They're typically, the people that are organizing the camporee are always looking for other activities to engage the scouts in. Well, here's one more activity, a fantastic high technology activity. You also use the word STEM, S-T-E-M, Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math. It's a nifty buzzword that says this will get them engaged with technology. And all you've got to do is line up for the third weekend in October. So get out there early in the year, get in with their planning so that they can shift that Jamboree to the third weekend.
Jim, Jeff asks, are there guidelines around what modes, what bands, other protocols that you can suggest briefly for JOTA and JOTI?
Yes, there are. At scouting.org/JOTA, select, it's called Operator Guidelines in the menu. And under Operator Guidelines, it's a listing of all the scouting frequencies. There's actually designated scouting frequencies. And most of the modes are available to you, and it will talk about the Echolink node. There's a JOTA-365 node on Echolink that's very handy to have. So it's all right there in Operator Guidelines.
Great. Gene, Alpha Charlie 8 Radio Hotel, said he's considering being on staff for the 2017 Jamboree, and he'd like to know how he can get involved working with the staff, how he can get involved with the 2017 Jamboree and with JOTA at the Jamboree.
Great question. They're actually taking sign-ups now. You can, I think it's, you know what, I probably will need to post that online, but it's on a website, the Summit Jamboree 2017, but you can register your interest in participating as a staff member. And when you sign up, you get to, or when you register your interest, and there's no dollars that are transferred or anything at this early stage, but you can sign up or register your interest, is a better phrase, for 3 different activities. So one of them would be K2BSA, and there may be some other activities that you'd be interested in serving on. So you register your interest, and then at some point before the Jamboree, there'll be chairman appointed. Last year I was a chairman, and there'll be staff selections, and people will be interviewed and queried on their skill sets, etc., and then signed up to participate on staff. It's and you can learn a lot more about being a staff member on that. Maybe Google Summit and Jamboree, but I'll post it on the K2BSA website and on their Facebook page.
Steve asks, Jim, will you be at the JOTA event at the National Scouting Museum this year?
No, there is an event there. There typically is every year. Tom N5HYP puts that on. I say that he is a radio scouting rock star for all the work that he does there. I will be making it there. My involvement with the World Scout team is going to mean that I'm doing some website work. It looks like there's some hand labor involved in some of the things, so it looks like I'm going to be engaged there. I'm hoping to turn the rig on and get on the air. Last year I had a few text messages and got on the air with a few stations, so that was kind of fun. But I won't be able to make it to the Scouting Museum.
Okay, great. Briefly, are there any other scouting radio events other than JOTA?
Let's see. Well, there is the World Scout Jamboree, and there is an amateur radio station on the air from each of those, as well as the National Jamboree, and many national jamborees around the world actually put on amateur radio activities. And this summer there was a number on the air from, I know, Finland, the Netherlands, a lot of activities I'll tell you the K2BSA call sign, scouting organizations will reach out and reserve that call sign for use at their event. And I know, well, their Space Jam is a huge event that happens in, oh golly, it's in the summer. I won't pin down a date. It's in, it's at the old Chanute Air Force Base in the center of Illinois. They've had an ISS contact from that event going on 9 years now. So it's a big scout. So there's lots of those events that happen. We try to publish those on the K2BSA Facebook page and get word out about them.
Okay. Also want to know, let's see, are there any JOTA sites in Kansas that I can take my troop to?
Yes, there are. Look at, on the K2BSA website, under JOTA, there's a tab for registered stations. And all the stations that are getting on the air for Jamboree on the air are, well, maybe not all. We'd like all of them to, but most of them will. They'll register their stations there, and you can sort that by location, and you can see which ones in Kansas will be on the air. I know the Heart of America Council in the Kansas City areas got at least one operation, if not a couple. But I know there are some in Kansas that are on the air, and that would be a good way to look. It's lightly populated right now as far as station registrations. It's starting to pick up, and it'll be furious in the registration process in October. So as you get closer, don't give up. Keep looking.
Great. Also, Mark wanted to know, is there anything like a DX cluster when the JOTA stations are on the air that makes it easy to spot them?
I think there is, and I just can't. That's something that I need to get up, become more familiar with. But I believe that there is, and I just can't recall what the URL is or just how it works.
You know, I think you'll find by logging into any of the DX clusters that are networked that weekend, there are lots in the comment fields. It says JOTA.
Exactly.
So I think that is, but if you find something out, Jim, maybe you could post it on the K2BSA website as well.
Yep, I will do that.
And let's see, is there a way to get contact information for other JOTA stations that are registered? I think you covered that. It would be handy to reach out to some other JOTA stations and be able to set up a scheduled QSO, but you've got that on your website, the ones that are registered.
We have a list of the registered stations on the website, and we're not sharing email addresses. That caused a few problems, but you have their call signs, and so and the call, I think the call sign of the control operator if they're using a special call. So that would be a good way. Just look it up on QRZ and make contact that way. Okay.
Frank wrote in and said you might want to take a look at this for dedicated JOTA cluster spots. If you write this down, it's http : www.pi4raz, that's Papa India 4 Radio Alpha Zulu, .nl, like November Lima, /JOTA cluster, JOTACLUSTER, /cluster.php. I don't know if that works, but Frank contributed that. And can Tiger Cubs participate, Jim? Would their participation be similar to the ARRL Kids Day?
Oh, you bet. And any rank of scouts or people who aren't scouts, get the kids involved. Absolutely. I've got, in fact, that brochure that I mentioned, I've got just an adorable shot of a tiger cub with holding a microphone, talking during Jamboree on the air. And so, absolutely, get them involved as young as possible.
Great. I think we got through most of them. There were several comments along the way. One of the ones I know we spent some time talking about this the fellow that had the question about council versus district, and he said correction, not council, but the local district roundtable, and but he also mentioned that the presentation to the council roundtable last year resulted in getting the Jamboree being planned for the JOTA weekend at the Boy Scout camp this year. So it looks like he got both things lined up, which is always a good thing, Jim.
Exactly, and that is the right event to show up at. It's when they're planning for fall Jamborees. That's typically happening in May, I'm told, maybe as early as April. But at that round table, make your pitch and work a little bit beforehand for some of the people who are on that round table to gain their support and their understanding for the event. But it takes a while, but you know, people are successful in lining up that Jamboree with Jamboree on the air.
You know, if we didn't get your question answered exactly, or you weren't able to get your question in, I encourage everyone on here to write down Jim's email address, which is real simple. It's jim.wilson, jim.wilson at K2BSA, that's K2 Boy Scouts of America .net. And Jim, I hope you don't mind answering some email on behalf of all the attendees and those that listen to the recording.
Absolutely. Delighted to answer those emails and help in any way that I can.
You know, Jim, this has been one of the most interesting webinars that we've had, and we really appreciate your time, all the work that you put into the preparation of the webinar, and certainly all of us around the world thank you for your contribution to scouting. And scouting has meant the world to my family and lots of families and the scouters yet to come. And we also want to give thanks to the Worldwide Radio Operators Foundation for sponsoring the webinar. And if you would like to listen to this webinar again in a few days' time, the recording of this webinar and the slides will be available up on the WWROF.org website. Just click on Webinar Archive. And you can also get these slides for your own use on the K2BSA website. So, Jim, any last comments before we shut her down for tonight?
Well, Ken, thank you very much for hosting this. And as you noted, I'll have those slides up on the K2BSA.net website. Also, there's so many resources on that site as well as the scouting.org site. Including radio merit badge, workbooks and training material, you name it, we've got it. Put it to use, and look forward to talking to most of you during Jamboree on the Air, third weekend in October.
Jim, 73 from West Middlesex, Pennsylvania, and 73 from K3LR, and we'll look for you down the log.
All right, 7-3, Tim. Thank you very much.
All right. Good night.
Good night.